Now please welcome to the stage OneGoal CEO and co-founder, Jeff Nelson.
Good evening. Can you hear me? All right, so prior to that speech, I thought I had a dubious job of being the last speaker, and then he spoke. The only good thing about going after you is to just be able to say thanks. That was extraordinary. I also want, that's the first time I've heard that speech. I want to point out one quick thing. People always ask us to try to describe OneGoal. You noticed the first time he smiled was when he talked about you. There was this little moment, that is OneGoal. Like, that is OneGoal. So thank you, appreciate you both. So I think I'm the one person who has spoken at each of these things for 9 years. And so in order to at least attempt to not say the same thing I said last year or the year prior, I decided to move away from the podium, rip up the speech, pick up the microphone, and speak from the heart. So for better or for worse, like Tuggle said, you've got my full authentic self tonight. I just want to share a few things of what's on my mind before we turn up the lights and get out of the Palmer house. Let me start first halfway around the world. Bear with me. There is a community of people, a culture of people who live in northern Tanzania and southern Kenya called the Maasai people. They become a fairly famous tribe for a variety of reasons. They've been in that part of the world for centuries, and as generation passed to next generation, so too have been passed a set of rituals. And one of those rituals, which you may have heard of before, I think is extremely appropriate and poignant for our time tonight. The story goes something like this. When a Maasai warrior is walking down the road and they meet another Maasai warrior, the expected greeting is the first person to say, "How are the children?" And the expected response is, "All the children are well." Not, "How are you?" Not even, "How are your kids?" But, "How are the children?" In that beautiful, very simple exchange, you understand everything about that culture. The premium that is placed on the collective youth, the way in which the health of the entire community is measured by the young people as a collective. So we're in Chicago. This is our community. I would argue, and I think Valerie is a perfect speaker for us tonight because this is a collective community across the United States. So the question I think for us tonight is, how are the children? I think you could answer that question in a variety of different ways. Let me offer one. You heard it in this video, but it bears repeating. Every single year in the United States of America, the most prosperous country on the face of the earth, 1 million young people show up to high school having grown up in poverty. And a decade later, less than 200,000 of those young people have earned any type of post-secondary degree or credential. 1 million, less than 200,000. Now, to be clear, a post-secondary degree or credential does not guarantee anything in this country. But the opposite is also true. If you are a young person who grows up in poverty and you do not earn some form of a post-secondary degree, certificate, credential, you are almost guaranteed to remain in poverty. And if you so choose to have children, they are also almost guaranteed to remain in poverty. This is cyclical, generational poverty. I think many of us in this room would argue it is the biggest stain on our collective democracy that currently exists today. That the bank account that the dollar figure in your parents' bank account largely determines where you wind up on your 25th birthday. Said another way, every single year in this country, 800,000 young people turn 25 with almost no access to a living wage, much less a family-sustaining wage. So if we were to be honest with ourselves and ask, how are the children? I think the answer is pretty clear. They are not all well. It was from this backdrop 10 years ago that we started OneGoal. And Sarah beautifully described what we do, how we do it, and then these two amazing young people, I'm calling you young person, described what it looks like in practice. Let me summarize the last 10 years in sort of two ways. The first thing that we have done, and when I say we, I think Tuggle started this way tonight. By the way, when you go into his classroom, he's just called Tuggle. So I'm going to call him Tuggle. We collectively, this room, our educators, our fellows, our alums, our partners, we have built a model that is working. Today, our incoming students are projected to complete a college degree at a rate that eclipses the middle class. And the second thing that we've done is we've grown. As Sarah said, as the video said, 5 years ago I stood at that podium and we were serving 1,000 students in one community. Today we're serving students in 5 states, and between 9,000 and 10,000 students will walk through our door this year. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. The bad news is that we are not on pace to close the degree divide within our lifetime. That is the vision. So when we take a really hard look, and we don't have to look very hard, we know that while there is a lot to be proud of, we have a long way to go. So 11 months ago, we began to write our next plan. We call it Phase 3. It's called Phase 3 simply because there have been 2 plans before it. The singular term we are using for Phase 3 is transformation. And transformation is no small, little, incremental change. It is a transformation. There is a 65-page document, and trust me, if you want to talk about it, you shoot me an email, and I will talk to you about it for 5 hours. But we don't have time, so I'm going to summarize it in 2 ways. This is our destination card 5 years from now. This is to hold ourselves accountable to the next 5 years. First, we intend, with this room, to build the largest pipeline of college graduates from low-income communities that this nation has ever seen. And secondly, I would argue more importantly, to build a set of products and practices that can be scaled at a radical level, not incremental, so that at the end of this plan, we are not talking about 20 or 30,000 students annually, but we are talking about 500 or 600,000 or 800,000. This is no small plan. This is not, if Burnham was in the room, this is not a little plan. But I would argue that if we can, when we do accomplish those connected aims, we have the chance to fundamentally change the course of the 21st century. James Baldwin once wrote, "For these are all our children. We will either profit by or pay for whatever they become." Before I get off, I want to share one story of what Baldwin's words look like in person. So 3 months ago, mid-January, I had one of those in and out trips to Houston. Got in early in the morning, was leaving later that night, and if you know the OneGoal team, I was scheduled back to back to back to back to back. And by the grace of God, one of those meetings canceled. And so I hustled over to the OneGoal office in Houston. I walked in the lobby, and our executive director down there is a woman named Marisa. And Marisa pulls me aside and says, "Hey, I really want you to meet somebody." I said, "Great." I turned around. She said, "This is Isabel Garcia." Isabel is an alumna of our program, and she just so happened to be in the office that day. So Isabel and I go huddle up at a desk. I've got about 20 minutes. We share stories. And at the end of the 20 minutes, I asked Isabel, "Are you comfortable with me sharing your story with others?" She said one word, "Please." Here's the short version. Isabel showed up halfway through high school into her OneGoal classroom, and she, quote, was attending high school a few hours a week. Needless to say, she was not on track to a college degree, much less a high school degree. In the next 2 years, she changed her GPA, she increased her standardized test scores. She said, I, quote, changed my mindset. By the end of high school, she had been admitted to 4-year and 2-year institutions, which is what made it so jarring that 4 months later, she did not enroll in college. That morning, 3 months ago, I asked why. Her answer was, Jeff, I knew that if I didn't go to college, I could not fail out of college. If I didn't go, I could not fail. She said the fear was palpable. The pull to stay home was real. It was at this moment in this conversation that I noticed collegiate gear around her. She had a notebook that had it looked like it was her college name. And so I said, it looks like you're in college right now. She said, I am. I said, so what happened? She said, OneGoal happened. And I said, tell me more. She then described a young man on our staff named Matt Sawyer. Matt is a frontline staff member in the same realm of what Odette does, which pinpoints young people who are not currently on track to achieve their own goals while in college. And I said, so what did Matt do? And she said, he called and called and called and called. By the end of that calendar year, they had rewritten the collegiate plan, and she had enrolled in Houston Community College. She began taking courses during the day, and she had a night shift as well. Isabel is the first person to acknowledge that that first semester was not easy at all. But she's 3 semesters into college right now. Her last 2 semesters, she's at a 4.0 GPA. Going back to Tuggle, he said something earlier which was, I don't know if you said where is Tuggle? Somewhere in here, sorry. He said something about the fact that the journeys were not linear. Like Isabel's story is not linear by any stretch of the imagination, but she is doing it, make no mistake. At the end of our conversation, I asked her the question that I tend to ask every OneGoal fellow, whether they like it or not, which is, where do you want to be on your 25th birthday? She gets this big old smile like she had been waiting for that one from the minute we sat down. And she says, I know where I'm going to be on my 25th birthday. I am going to be someone else's Matt. And then I'm going to be somebody else's Marisa. And then someday, Jeff, I'm going to have your job. My first reaction was, damn, that was a good interview. And then the second very quick response was, God, I hope you're right. For these are all our children. We will either profit by or pay for whatever they become. We are already profiting from what Isabella has become in her most authentic, beautiful self. I think the goal for us, the objective, is to ensure that we reach the day in this country where 800,000 young people like Isabel reach their goals, live out their full, authentic lives, contribute massively and fundamentally to changing this country into the democracy that we originally, in theory, designed it for. Somebody asked me a couple months ago, when do you all think you're done? Which is a fascinating question. First of all, I think we are done when we are walking along LaSalle or Jackson or Clark, and I see you walking on the other side, and I ask, how are the children? And you can, with a straight face, say, all the children are well. And as Sarah said, until that day, we got a lot of work to do. So we've got 2 or 3 more minutes, and Liz, the beautiful Liz Thompson, could not have possibly teed me up better. So we are not, as you've noticed, welcoming Irvin Johnson up onto the stage. He's not here. He's working on the NBA draft tonight. But with 2 or 3 minutes left, I want to invite every single person in this room to do 2 things. And look, I was a 6th grade teacher, and I've learned the hard lesson that if I tell you the instructions and don't ask you to wait until I'm done, no one's going to listen to what I'm saying. So in a minute, every single person has a card in front of them. And in that card, there's an opportunity to commit for the first time ever, or my gosh, there are some people in this room, We named the award after John Dugan. He precedes me by 3 years. There are people in this room who have given an enormous amount of their treasure, enormous, for years. And there are some people who are brand new to this movement. I would ask, no matter where you are on that spectrum, that you discern over the next few minutes about recommitting, getting involved again. Liz, the beauty in what she said was that we always get this question of, well, I feel like OneGoal's good now. Look at their board. Look at their gala, whatever. Look at the degree divide. We are not even close. We are just getting started. So I would ask you over the next few minutes, discern whether or not you can give, invest, and give again. And at the end of that period of time, we'll turn on the lights, we'll welcome you off, and I would ask one last thing, which is over this next few days, by the end of this week, determine whether or not you want to get involved more at OneGoal or at some organization like OneGoal in this city. We need every single person, and we need everyone's friends if we're going to close this divide in our lifetime. So thank you so much for the time. God bless, and we'll talk to you soon.